Are you as totally confused about the new material shaders for models in HitFilm as I am? Do they look awesome, but you're totally terrified to try them? Well, I'm Jay Haynes for the Film Sensei channel. Welcome to Live with Sensei. We are streaming today on Twitch TV as well as YouTube and Facebook. And today I have all the answers for you with my special guest, and that is Mike Miller from Triumph Visual and from HitFilm University, known as Triumph 23 on the forums. Welcome, sir.
Good morning, everybody. So I said to Frank, Spider Hank, on the forums about a half an hour ago, and I hope Frank is logged in. I haven't actually looked yet. I just kind of had an idea, a new idea about how to approach this last night, and by last night I mean while I was sleeping. So this could all fall apart very poorly. You could be about to see me fall completely on my face. Otherwise, I'm going to hope that I don't screw this up too badly.
Oh, I'm sure it's going to be fantastic. So
yeah,
let me ask you guys this in the viewing audience. Who in the viewing audience has actually worked with models in HitFilm? If you have, put a hashtag models on there. And if you have worked with the new shaders, put hashtag shaders in there. We want to take a look and see who has actually done that in the forums. And let's just take a real quick peek at who's here. Terry with 4K Productions, great to have you. Alexander Filmworks, I'm glad you're here. Vazio, welcome. And Frank, Spider Hank, is in the house. And not Captain America today, Spider-Man. You better believe it. So
with the Film Right T-shirt, right? Shoot at repeat.
There, yeah. And Greg with Gray Motion Visual Effects is in the house. Also, New Dawn Games. Hey, Sensei. Hey, New Dawn. Great to have everybody. Thank you for being here. So with that, I think I will turn it over to you, Mike, and we're going to start with whatever you decide we're going to start with.
Well, you guys get to stare at my ears a lot today. Okay. First thing I want to note is while I was prepping this, and I noticed this last night, that the HitFilm manual has been updated with some information on the new shader. So you may want to go ahead and open the manual on your browser in a background in another window. Just take a look at that as we go along on this. There's some information. It is one of the source documents that I used. And you'll see me looking over at the side a lot because, printer's out of toner and I couldn't print my notes out, so I'm looking at a second screen. So, okay, HitFilm had, Jay, can we, do you have a way of split screening this and putting my screen mostly up and then just kind of keeping me in the corner on the side? There we go. Nobody needs to look at what's primarily my earbud. So, we're in HitFilm and we are in the HitFilm Pro 16. This is the model import screen, and what I have set up is a very, very primitive model. We don't need to get into the full details on everything. I think this will be enough to kind of get the points. And it's low-res textures, Frank. It's only 2000 by 1000 because I'm kind of trying to real-time this. HitFilm 16 added 2 new illumination models, or shaders, or render engines. You'll see those terms used interchangeably. And what a shader, illumination model, render engine does is tells the computer how to describe the materials. And they've used the buzzword of PBR. I'm just going to get this one out of the way quickly. I don't really like the term PBR because if you look up the history of PBR, which stands for physically based rendering, there aren't many criteria to be a physically based renderer. You basically have to pay attention to 2 things: the angle of the incidence at which the light reflects off the model, and the angle at which the light reaches the viewer. This is a bireflective directional function, BRDF. But if you look up existing physically based render shaders, 2 things you'll find on that list are called Phong and cook-torrence. And here we are looking at a Phong shader, and here's a cook-torrence shader, and then the metallic-roughness and the specular glossiness shaders. HitFilm has always had physically based rendering. I hate the term physically based rendering. The Lambert engine is physically based rendering, or Nair is physically based rendering. Ray tracing is physically based rendering. The principled shader in Blender is physically based rendering. It's actually a metallic roughness, which we'll be talking about. So I just kind of wanted to get that rant out of the way. But the new shaders in HitFilm 16 are called metallic roughness and specular glossiness, and they're both based off of a BRDF model developed by Disney around 2008 for Tangled. And it was added to HitFilm to add compatibility with the GLTF model format. GLTF is GL transform format, and it's the primary distribution model used by Sketchfab. So the main thing about the metallic roughness and the specular glossiness is they're going to make it a lot easier for you to download models from Sketchfab and just bring them into HitFilm, and they should look good. One of the things in HitFilm that you have to do is when you load in models is you have to set up all of the material parameters from scratch by hand. They don't always come in correctly, but the GLTF model spec defines all of that. So the main thing with those new shaders is making Sketchfab a lot easier to use. Take a quick glance at my notes. Original HitFilm shader was Phong, added in HitFilm 1. The cook-torrence was added in HitFilm 4. Material stayed the same until 16, blah, 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 GLTF. Okay. GLTF, the model format, is developed by the Kronos group. That's Kronos, and Kronos.org. So if you were to go to kronosgroup.org, kronos.org, they've got a lot of information on their technology. And if I look for Kronos GLTF, if I were to search for that, you can get a more technical overview of what GLTF does than we're going to talk about today. If you really want to get into, here's the specifications. There's a bunch of sample models you can download and play with. There's a reference guide. So there we go. You have that available. Yes, I'm starting with look at the HitFilm manual and look at the Kronos group. Do your outside homework. Hi, Coast to Coast Drones. Hi, Sebastian. Hi, Khan. Hi, George Film. Yes, a Sam Raimi suit. Okay, so I'll try and talk quickly through all of the shader functions, and then I'll try and do the demo, and I'm going to try and do this quickly and keep this under an hour. And as I already said, this kind of came to me while I was sleeping, so I'm either about to fall on my face or I came up with something brilliant. So here we are in the Phong Shader, and there are a bunch of things that we have more or less in common in all of the materials that we're going to look at. My color swatches. Okay, so diffuse, specular, ambient, and emissive, where these all come down to diffuse color, specular color, ambient color, emissive color. These all deal with the base geometry of the object that's being brought in before you add any maps. They will affect the maps. A gray is generally good to have. I'm going to make an emissive color of, how about green? You'll see why that one. I want to make an emissive color of green in a minute and turn the alpha up to 55. There we go, because I've got an emissive map set. Now I'll turn that off. I don't want to do that. Without an emissive map, that's a bad thing to do. Okay, there we go. Almost falling on my face. So here we go. We have these map types. There's the diffuse map. I'll remove that so I can put that back on. I'll take the specular map off and the normal map back on. So I've got a sphere. It's boring. It's gray. It's plain. If I want to make it look like something, I have a diffuse map, and a diffuse map is like giving it a paint job. There's my boring diffuse map. The specular map controls where these specular highlights are, and the specular highlights are the bright highlights coming off the light. In the Phong Shader, I can adjust that. Pretty much, I just have the shininess slider, and that's the only thing to adjust the specular highlight. If I add a specular map here, which is actually this one, this is going to be this black and white map icon that you can see. I'll show that to you later. And the specular map, if it's white, it reflects specularly. If it's black, it doesn't. So I add that black and white specular map, and now only my red areas are reflecting specular. And that is, in fact, what I want. because theoretically that gray area is metal and this red area is paint. Bump maps are black and white maps. White is high, black is low. It's a way of faking surface detail on an object. So when I load that in, and if I play with the bump depth, then I kind of start getting this beveled look to the sphere. But we're not going to use the bump map. We're going to use the normal map. A normal map is similar to a bump map, except it maps in 3 dimensions. So the red, the green, the blue channels all map different information. And again, it's kind of giving me this fake beveled surface. Now these red squares look just a little bit more picked up. Drink Mountain Dew. We are not sponsored by them, but maybe they'll give Film Sensei money. So in HitFilm 16, we added 2 new maps to the Fong Shader. And the first one that I'm going to talk about is the occlusion map. And I'm not going to be using any occlusion maps today. You might also see those as AO maps. Ambient occlusion is like in that bedroom corner behind me where the 2 walls and the ceiling meet, and it's the shadows in that area caused by the diffuse light, caused by the cast shadows on each other from being close. And HitFilm's material settings have a way of generating ambient occlusion, but you may also bake an ambient occlusion map in your 3D program. And HitFilm hasn't supported occlusion maps till now. So if there were an AO map with my model, I can now load that in rather than have HitFilm do it. I haven't done any tests yet to see if an AO map is faster than letting HitFilm generate the AO. If I use the AO map that's been provided with the model, I'm stuck with the AO that the model provides. HitFilm's ambient occlusion generation lets me affect the size of the AO, the darkness of the AO. So what I'd say in general is if your model has an AO map, use it. I suspect that's faster in HitFilm because it's got a pre-generated map rather than generating it every frame. But I would think that HitFilm's material settings are going to give you more control over the ambient occlusion if you want to take the time to play with that. And then we have the emissive map. Emissive maps are also black and white maps, and now I'm going to introduce my emissive map. And here's the emissive color, and the emissive color ignores shading. So if I make my emissive color this bright green again with the emissive map, then you'll see this green appear, and now I'll go ahead and clear that and commit that to this scene. So what the emissive map is doing is self-illumination, and it's stuff that glows. So now I have my sphere on a cheap little background, and with the emissive map, you can see how that green is wrapping all the way around. It's not falling into shadow like the red and the yellow. So let's cover that covers those basic map types. Illuminated, receives shadows, cast shadows, visibility on layer, receives ambient occlusion. Okay, so that was what I wanted to talk about with that. Let me go ahead and now I'm going to duplicate this. And we're going to name this cook-torrence. And in cook-torrence, same sphere, I'm going to go ahead and clear the emissive map. We're not going to use emissive maps for the rest of this discussion because I don't have anything more to say about them. So let's change this shader from Fong to cook-torrence. Nope, I lie. Let me hit OK on that and go back into Fong, my Fong sphere for a moment, because there were a couple things I skipped. And if I talk about it once, I won't have to talk about it again. So Fong with my specular highlights, I got my shininess. And then my diffuse reflectivity. So diffuse reflectivity is what happens when light starts bouncing off objects. As it bounces off my hand, it scatters off my hand. As it bounces off my hoodie, it scatters off my hoodie. As it bounces off anything, it scatters off that. And diffuse illumination is how that bounce light kind of starts affecting other things. I don't know if it shows up on the webcam, but I can see as I bring my other hand closer to my, the auto is not going to show on my hand. Diffuse reflectivity is picking up general illumination from the objects around you. So if I bust out of here again, now I've got some diffuse reflectivity, so the shadows aren't falling completely to black. It's picking up some color from my environment map. Whereas if I go back and turn my diffuse reflectivity down to 0, See how dark that gets? So that's what the diffuse reflectivity is doing. And diffuse reflectivity is common to all the shader maps. Specular reflectivity is your sharp reflections. I'll just crank that all the way up to 100. And maybe I should have chosen a texture map, that background map that has more. You can kind of see it over here on the mouse pointer. Maybe I should change my. Maybe I should find another background very quickly. How about, yeah, we'll go with Red Planet. And Red Planet can go into my environment map, and we'll just go right back to my Phong sphere. There we go. So that's showing those specular reflections a little bit better, because now at the bottom you can really see that orange on the ground, and you can see that purple on the sky, and you can see some of the texture in there. So that was a better environment map for what we want to talk about today. All right. Index of refraction. Refractions in HitFilm are surface refractions, light wrapping around a surface, not volume reflections like passing through glass. The index of refraction, 1 is air, other numbers are not. And for an index of refraction, you're just going to have to go online and look this up for materials. If I do 1.5, that's going to be roughly glass. And then if I turn that refraction amount up all the way, and you'll see how I'm you see how I'm more getting that upside down reflection in there. And that's what's really dealing more with the refraction, is it's wrapping the surface reflections, not going through. But it's good for making metallics. So the Phong Shader is good-ish for metal. It's good for plastic. It's good for glossy things. But it is the least helpful. Then the opacity map just makes the whole thing transparent or not. Enjoy Mountain Dew. Okay. Refraction mode, spherical, planar. How's the refraction the reflections being mapped onto the object? Spherical, if you have a sphere or a cylinder or something like that. If you're doing something that's like a plane or a cube and very flat, you might want planar. And that's Phong. And everything in HitFilm's materials builds off Phong. So let me duplicate my Phong sphere, and I'm going to name that cook-torrence sphere. Actually, I lie. I will do one more. I will go back into my Phong sphere and I'll do one more thing. Because I got myself a little bit out of order. Why am I not looking at my script? What's that environment map? Spider, Frank, I'll try and remember where that is. Spider with element using a BDR. Yes, Frank can. Salty Gaming, we're going fast. So here we go. Play it back, and you will get that. This is okay. Diffuse color. If I change the diffuse color, that will affect the underlying colors of the texture. The specular color, if I change the specular color, that will affect the color of the specular highlight. And I'll just go ahead and do that quickly. So now you can see with my light, where by changing the color on the diffuse, my whole thing's a little bit more purple. By changing the color on the specular highlight to green, I now have that green highlight. And this is important in the Phong Shader. In a Phong Shader, if you're trying to generate a material, something that's metallic or shiny or glossy, you kind of have to dial in the material values. Everything is by hand. So that specular map, which I should make its own composite shot. So the specular map we're using is just black and white, and the black and has no specular, and the white has the specular. Let's go ahead and add a gradient, radial gradient. Gradial. Can I spell radial today? Here we go. Let me drop a radial gradient on this, and we'll make its blend overlay Now we'll make its blend normal. Yeah. Inner radius can be white. The outer color can be black. And no, I will make this a none. None. And then I'll grab the outer radius. And let's see, I think I want my black plane underneath. All right. All right. There's a function that got added in HitFilm 15 called override materials. And what that lets me do is use a comp shot or a layer rather than the assigned texture map to texture a model. And what I want to do is override the specular map that we loaded with the little gradient that I just created. And if I do that, you see now that my specular highlight, rather than being confined to one area, is now kind of on everything. And then it is, let me inner radius this a little bit more, and then outer radius that a bit more. So as I start increasing and decreasing the size of that highlight, I'm getting more areas, but you'll also see I have a very strong highlight here and it's falling off. So with all of these maps, these specular maps, these black and white maps, most of them are not black or white. This will change later. Let's get off the Phong sphere. Okay, back to cook-torrence. Seriously. Only if my skill level with the environment map go in sunset layers.
Mike, I think you created two cook-torrence models, so pay attention to that. You created that one.
I have the cook-torrence model, and then I have the cook-torrence sphere composite shot.
Okay, all right.
I think that's what you're seeing here.
I'm just making sure you're not getting yourself confused over there.
Hope not. So I've now changed. So now we're looking at our cook-torrence sphere. And it's very similar to Phong, right? We've still got the diffuse map, the specular map, the normal map, the bump map, the emissive map, the occlusion map. I don't need to change any of those things. The same things stay the same with the diffuse, the specular, the ambient, and the emissive color. My diffuse reflectivity and specular reflectivity stay the same. Same with the index of refraction, excuse me, and refraction amount and opacity. So what changes in cook-torrence is we add this thing here called Fresnel. And Fresnel is one of those things that dealt with when I said bidirectional reflectance. It's the angle of incidence where the light bounces off the model and the angle of incidence where it hits your eye. And the Fresnel deals with the angle of incidence of the light ray when it bounces off the object, and it's used for creating metals. And there are these three values here, 0.9, 0.9, 0.9, and these are just RGB values. They're really just color values. There's a drop-down menu here which has been set up by FX Home with some metals on it, but I want to make this really ridiculously off. I'm going to make that pure blue for the moment. And I'm also going to go ahead and take my diffuse color up to white. And brighten up. Ooh, no, not white. White is too much. 180. Ooh, that's interesting. Oh, roughness, okay. Something is... Did you see that render glitch?
I did see that. That was interesting. It must be because you took the alpha down. That's when it happened on the diffuse.
Take the alpha down?
Yeah, on diffuse color. You took it down.
Oh, okay.
180.
Thank you, Jay. I didn't see that. I meant to take the value down rather than the diffuse. Okay.
There you go.
Thank you for catching that mistake. That was going to drive me crazy. 0, 0. Look. 0 and 1 And then what I'll do is I'll change the spec highlight to something like, I'll go back to that green. And let us open up my cook-torrence sphere. And my cook-torrence sphere can remove the Phong model, and then it's going to use the cook-torrence model. And we come in, illuminate and receive shadows. I have an environment map. I want to use the composite shot. No, I want to use the layer, and the layer will be the environment map. And there we go. And we go back in the cook-torrence sphere. Okay. Let's go ahead and set diffuse reflectivity to 50. We'll turn specular reflectivity up to 100. And now, no, too bright. Brighter than I wanted. And I'll make that 50. And I'll make that 35. And if we move that light around, might want to zoom in a bit here. Okay, so here we go. So now that I've zoomed in a little bit here, let me see what's going on. My colors. My specular color is that, and I probably should go ahead and make that one as well. So you can see what's happening here now that I've zoomed in is I'm picking up some green highlights on the specular map. Probably should have turned off the, let's turn down the diffuse in the specular. Here we go. Just see the light doing its thing. I think that's showing a little bit better. Okay. The Fresnel effect is subtle, but if you look a little bit, you see how as these highlights are starting to fall off towards the shadow side, that gray value is also getting a little bit more bluish. And there's just a little bit of green getting picked up. Green was a bad color choice for the highlight. Let's take the roughness up. Got to take the, okay, I shouldn't have raised the diffuse color that much. Tripping and barely managing to avoid falling on my face. There we go. Now we can see what's going on. Don't raise your diffuse color too high. So I have a specular highlight color of green, and I have a Fresnel color of pure blue. And now that I've got that diffuse color nice and low, we can see how those are starting to interact, because what I'm getting on my highlights is I'm actually getting this multicolored highlight that's a bit teal in the middle, where the green and the blue of the Fresnel and the specular highlight are interacting. And then that's falling off more to green as it passes off to the side. So the main thing with this is the Fresnel can affect the colors of your highlights. The specular highlight color can affect the colors of your highlights. And this is all about trying to dial in different metallic colors. With Phong and with cook-torrence, you're creating the material almost in its entirety by using the maps. And if I wanted something to be less reflective, like if it was going to be dirty, then I would put some gray in the specular map to dull that out a little bit. This roughness control, if you picture like a golf ball, the divots on a golf ball, if you imagine that the entire surface of your model is covered with really, really small divots, these divots capture the light, they scatter it back. So what the roughness does, the size of the roughness is going to scatter your specular highlights more. And let me take that back to aluminum, and I'll just take that back in. And this will just show what the roughness slider is doing. We'll take the specular down as well, and diffuse. Okay. So with a low roughness, I have a very sharp highlight. With a high roughness, right, it spreads out more and more and more. So this is very plasticky. This is pretty metallic. And then if I wanted to get into something like wood, that might be a roughness of about there. And then once I'm getting up into roughnesses of like 40 or 50, we're getting into things that look like stone. Duplicate couture sphere. Metallic, roughness. quick glance at my notes. Surface my professor, Specular Highlight, look at cook-torrence. Tutorials sure are a game changer. That's right, incorporate them. The alpha for emission. The highlight
Yeah, that's when you took the alpha down to 180. He was just
all right.
he was making the same comment I was.
Con, if I were trying to make this a realistic composite, yes, I would kind of try and want the highlights to match the background color light. I'm not necessarily trying to make a realistic sphere or trying to make something that looks good. We're just kind of talking how the actual functions in the shader work. But yeah, if I were, so the highlight should be matching the background color, right? Yeah, if I were trying to make this scene look good, I'd I'd orbit around, I'd find the sun in this sky, wherever it is, and then I'd sample that for the light color, and I would maybe, take a specular color off of these dunes in the background, and I would do some color matching. But for what we're talking about today, we're not getting as far as trying to make it look realistic, because
and we did a live stream where we had a competition to see who could make it look the most realistic, and there was a lot of learning that happened during that live stream. It was a great opportunity to see experts really working with these models and making them work in the scene itself.
Hi Tony, sorry you lost the rugby match against Wales. Doing NPR right now. Realism comes later. Oh boy, I wanted to make a political joke there, but we'll let that one go. Okay, so we're about to get into the metallic roughness shader, and the metallic roughness and the spec gloss shaders in HitFilm 16 are where things get different. I said a couple times with the Phong and the cook-torrence shaders, you're really making your material, and anyone who's worked with models in HitFilm for a long time, like Tony, see if he were here, or Gray Motion is about to laugh, or Spider Hank, Greg, you can spend a lot of time in HitFilm sharing out your materials and tuning them and adjusting your specular maps and adjusting your colors and adjusting everything, and you make it go, and you go back and forth, and you take forever, and you finally get everything looking fantastic, and then you go into another scene and you change your background and you change your environment and you change your lighting, and suddenly everything looks horrible again, and you have to change your maps and you have to change your specular color and you have to change your emission, and you do a lot of tuning. And particularly with cook-torrence, you can get some really amazing looking results out of HitFilm. Some of the stuff I've seen Gray Motion do, or Tony Cienic's Visual Studio, I mean, their stuff is fantastic. They do things that look way better than mine. It's really amazing. So once you get into the metallic roughness shader, it's another PBR shader, and Blender's principled BVRF is a metallic roughness shader. And what makes metallic roughness and specular glossiness newer shaders is a lot of the material properties are kind of baked in. So we're not messing around using a specular map to not only define the reflective and the non-reflective areas, it's really defining the look of the material, because part of a material is defined by how much light it reflects. Obviously, my hand reflects less light than this kind of shiny can, and both reflect less light than a mirror. So a metallic roughness shader and a specular glossiness shader, more the metallic roughness, sets up some mathematical constants and makes some assumption about the properties of the materials that you are working with that are taken from observations of real-world objects. The creators of the shaders crunched the numbers and did a bunch of the work so you don't have to. So a metallic roughness shader, as it implies, doesn't want to know where your diffuse map is and your specular map is. It wants to know, is a material metal or is it not metal? And that's all it cares about. And then a material that's not metal, it's going to assume is 4% reflective. And then if it is metal, it's going to do a bunch of other stuff to it. So if we go in here, what will be our metallic roughness shader, and change it to metallic roughness, first you see that this got a lot darker, and then you'll see that a bunch of these colors over here changed, or a bunch of these options over here changed. And I think I'm going to need to... This is where I could fall on my face. You can get more realistic results with the metallic roughness and the specular glossy shaders, but at least for me, they've been harder to wrap my head around, because while they do more or less the same thing as cook-torrence and Phong and the other shaders, they do so in a different way. We've been using a simple diffuse map. It's just red squares on a gray background. If this were going to be a fully painted background, my diffuse map would have all my dirt on it, it would have my streaks on it, it would have some shading on it. So if I wanted a dirt map, I would paint some really dark areas and then smears of grease, and then I might paint something really bright on it. And the diffuse map in a metallic glossiness shader uses an abbreviated range of values. So if it's something that's non-metallic, the brightness value, I'll go into the diffuse color, of the details on your map should be between about 40 and about 80. So this white color would be way too high. This pure saturated red technically is way too bright for a metallic roughness map. I would want it to look more like that dark value of 64. And then we see that, well, that was my diffuse color, so I didn't want to do that to it. So it makes the it makes painting the maps in metallic roughness a little bit more interesting. The normal map is the same, the emissive map is the same, the occlusion map is the same. So the metallic map is similar to the specular map, but here's where, and I'm just going to go ahead and load in the specular map that I created before and make that happen. So the metallic map is where things are white in the metallic map, and it's the same, right? It's just one of these grids, black and white. The white areas are gray, is now metal, and our red area is not metal. And where that's going to come in is let me find a good roughness value. Now you see how my specular highlight is happening on the red and the gray. There's not a specular map as such to control where the highlights go. In metallic roughness, it's all about, well, the metallicness and the roughness. So if I crank that metal value up all the way, then my metal pretty much disappears, because metal doesn't really have a color as such. So now I need to, start cranking up my reflectivity to see the metallic sections, because that's how the shader map works. And now we'll duplicate cook-torrence, we'll make that metal rough. We'll delete the cook-torrence sphere, we'll bring in the metal rough sphere, we'll assign our environment map. And we'll scale that to fit. So now when I toggle back and forth between these two comp shots, the cook-torrence sphere and the metallic roughness sphere, let me make a couple of adjustments to cook-torrence first. We'll take my specular reflection up to 50. We'll take my diffuse reflectivity up to 50, and we'll get out and make sure my specular map is there. Take my specular map off. Okay. So with my cook-torrence, I've got my specular map so that only my gray areas are doing specular reflections and picking up the mirror-like reflections. And I've got it set up with the environment map, and I've got it set up with the light. And it's looking pretty good. If I wanted to really tweak the material settings, I could start making this look like a metal sphere with red painted squares on it. But if I go over into the metal roughness, And we know that the environment map is the same, and we know that the lighting is the same because I copied the I copied the comp shot and just dropped in the same, just dropped in a different sphere. This is already starting to look a little bit more metallic. You can see some different characteristics in the reflections, along the terminator. You can see how now this red square is looking more plasticky, but it still has a spec highlight, and how this metal is looking very much like aged and pitted metal. And that is more of a fun, and I don't have to mess around with the Fresnel settings or anything like that to make that happen. It's just inherent in how the shader is working. Take a sip of my Mountain Dew. And I still have them, so it's the same thing with the metallic roughness. I can still adjust the spread of the highlight. Now I've got less of a highlight, right? And I can still, I can turn that metallic strength down. Metallic strength and a metallic map are usually very, very black and white. Usually an object is metal or not metal. You're not going to use a lot of gray areas in your map, and if you do, it's usually things like dirt. And you would usually, your metallic strength is usually going to be 0 or it's going to be 100. If you start doing, you can start doing things in that 50-ish range if you want to, but you're not going to really get a realistic result out of it, but you can do it. With materials, you just can't cover everything in an hour. It's too big a subject. We're just trying to tell you what the controls actually do. So typically a metal map is going to be pure black and pure white. Typically a metallic strength is going to be 0 or it's going to be 100. Clear coat. Clear coat is a function of the map that is if I have something glossy like a glossy paint on there. And I didn't really make a clear coat map, but let's do the black and white map. So we will make our clear coat map is our inverse of the metallic map. So now all the red should have a clear coat, none of the gray should. And clear coat roughness strength. And I actually need I haven't been able to get clear. I will be honest. I have not been able to get clear coat to do what I think clear coat is supposed to do. Oh, I can see it. All right. I can see the clear coat here around the edges of the sphere where it's falling off into the darkness. As I turn the clear coat strength up, we can see some brightening on these edges. So yeah, it looks like the clear coat is doing what I want it to do. And what I'll do is I'll turn my specular reflectivity down in the metal and hope that probably need a clear coat roughness map on there. If I give it the emissive map, take that normal map off. Yeah, that didn't do what I think it's supposed to do. Some more experience in the metric is built and change together as the trick to make it look real versus look good. No, there isn't high fill. I'm going to move on from clear coat for a moment and call that somewhere where I've fallen on my face just because I'm trying to keep this under an hour. And, we're about 45 minutes in and I wanted to spend about 15 minutes per material. when I was preparing my research for this and looking on the Kronos Group website, which is, I'll pull that back over, hey. When you look at the GLTF2 specifications and resources on GitHub, remember that the metallic roughness and specular glossiness shaders were added to HitFilm specifically to work with GLTF models as downloaded from Sketchfab. And last night I found that, it might even be this one. Oh, here, it's the headline right in front of me. New GLTF PBR materials released. Clear coat transmission and sheen extensions were announced in December 2020. And HitFilm 16, of course, came out in December 2020. So saying clear coat transmission and sheen extensions for GLTF PBR materials were announced in December 2020, and seeing that HitFilm 16, which was released in December 2020, has the parameters for clear coat intensity and roughness strength and normal map, and seeing that I'm not getting the results out of clear coat that I think I should, because we should be getting extra sheeny gloss like a car or a can on that red areas, it is possible that the clear coat in HitFilm is not working correctly, because it seems that this has been a brand new thing that's been added specifically to the GLTF spec, which is what HitFilm 16 is trying to emulate. So maybe we'll come back to this in a few months, and maybe I'll say, okay, I just screwed up on the clear coat, and here's what I did wrong. But I can't get, in none of my tests have been able to get clear coat to do what I want it to, and it's just because clear coat transmission and sheen extensions were announced in December 2020. Announced means, hey, we're announcing this new thing, and HitFilm came out in December 2020. It just, the HitFilm may have implemented off a beta implementation of the spec, and maybe HitFilm 17 will change things. So, okay. So I'm going to move on from that. The only other thing I want to talk of in metallic roughness that adds in is alpha cutoff and alpha mode. And what alpha cutoff does is it deals with a texture that is it deals with your diffuse map. It can now support transparency in the diffuse map. So the alpha map deals with how we're going to cut off on that. And the alpha cutoff, alpha mode, opaque is always opaque. Mask uses stuff as an unknown blend, and you guess or unknown are what you want to do. I'm going to have to set a random value and get out of here to kind of show what this is doing. So what I'll do is I'll set an alpha cutoff at 50%, 51%, and I'll set that to alpha mode mask. And what I will do in here with my metallic roughness sphere is this checkbox right here next to 02 that I've clicked and turned blue. That is what turns on the override materials. So what I'll do is I'll come in and I'll make the emissive map source the diffuse texture map. Okay, so I want that metallic roughness. I'm sorry, I want the diffuse to be the diffuse texture map layer. Now if I go into the diffuse map, here's where I can start making some changes. And what I'll do, I'll just do it with a rectangle mask. So if I mask that out, might need a grade layer on that. No.
Yeah,
I know what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, I don't need to mask it on anything at all. I did plan this out. There we go. So now I've just got some transparent. Now I've got red grid lines on a transparent background. And when I go back over to the metallic roughness, that did not do what I thought it should do. because I undid I undid my adding the not that one, diffuse comp. Diffuse map layer. There we go. So now that's kind of showing what our alpha, what that alpha mask mode was doing to our material. Alpha mode is mask, and you know, alpha cutoff was 48%. So what that's trying to do now is rather than treat a transparent area on the diffuse map as black, it's now being treated as transparent. So I guess the way to describe that is by using an alpha cutoff and an alpha mode in your diffuse map. You can bake your alpha map or your diffuse map where you can have partially transparent areas on things. So if I set that back to opaque,
I just gotta say, I had no idea you could do that. That's the coolest thing I've seen. That's really cool.
Yeah. And there's more cutoff in there. I have not played with the alpha as much as I should have, so there's really not much more I can say about it, other than just saying, you know, look, I can make that. You know, yeah, that is pretty cool, right? Because you couldn't make this kind of grid, cage-like sphere. You couldn't do that before HitFilm 16. Not within a right. It wouldn't happen.
Yeah, that's really cool. I could see a lot of advantages, especially if you're layering your render passing different passes. You could do things and let something underneath it show through. You know, that's really cool.
Yeah. All right. Spec gloss. Okay. I expect Frank to nod sagely in front of his computer right now. Of the 4 shader models in HitFilm, Specular Glossiness is by far the hardest to work with. In the roughly 10 minutes we have left, where I have another 20 minutes of material to talk about, my first recommendation for Specular Glossiness is just don't go there yet. And what we want to do is we want to learn enough about specular glossiness to be able to learn to look at a 3D model and determine if the model is built for specular glossiness. But painting specular glossiness maps are weird because they are truly different, fundamentally different from everything else that we've talked about so far. Specular glossiness is just a strange one. The diffuse map in specular glossiness is it's similar to metallic roughness in that you're defining if an area is glossy or not. But in a specular glossiness map, okay, in metallic roughness, we used a metallic map that defined where everything was metallic or not. And in spec glossiness, that information is kind of combined into your diffuse map. So to properly make this sphere for specular glossiness, this should not be a gray background with red squares on it. This should be a black background with red squares on it. The color of the metal or glossy areas in a specular glossy map is held in the specular map, specular map. So if I bring in, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of my diffuse map, and I'm going to bring in my, maybe I want to use the other one of that. I'm going to use that. And I guess I could use, yeah, I'll use the diffuse map. I want the diffuse map in there. I'm going to have to come out of here to do things correct. Diffuse specular, do I want to change the specular color? No. SG glossiness strength. Yeah, I will take the diffuse map off for now. Okay. my maps are completely set up incorrectly for specular glossiness. The maps that I generated were kind of set up for Phong and for cook-torrence, and they happened to work for metallic roughness without too much adjustment because I hadn't done a lot of surface detail painting that would have been wrong for metallic roughness that I needed to strip out. I kind of created the maps, the earlier maps I created for this, kind of in a way that would work for those three shaders, but that I know don't work at all for spec glossiness because it is really a fundamentally different type of shader. So here, even though my diffuse color is white and my specular color is gray, you see how as I rotate the sphere around, I'm getting these red highlights in the specular. And what's happening there is that's because my specular map is using what used to be my diffuse map. So now I'm telling the thing that things reflect red because that color information is actually in the specular map. And then I'm using the, what am I using? I'm using the specular map. In a metallic glossiness shader, I would use this map that if I wanted, the specular map here is set up so that the white would be the specular reflective areas and the black would be the non-reflective areas. And in spec gloss, that is reversed. It's supposed to be reversed. Huh. Very strange. That actually is working pretty. Let me go back to this one. All right. I'm not even going to try and create the proper colors for a spec gloss material here because I don't have enough time to do so. I'll try and find a model on my machine that has a specular gloss material and show that to you instead. As I said, my main advice for specular glossiness is don't even mess with it at this point. I could talk for an hour just on specular glossiness because it is weird. Just note that the glossiness strength is kind of acting like my roughness, but unlike the other models where I had no roughness and then all roughness and all that, you can see that it's kind of in the middle. I'm getting this, specular glossiness strength is 0, and as I approach 50, I start getting this diffused highlight with the colors in it spread out, and then as I move back up towards 100, the highlight suddenly sharpens up and then shrinks down and vanishes again. So you're just seeing that the glossiness strength on that is responding completely differently to how the shininess and roughness did in the other three models, illumination models. And the main difference in spec glossiness is just you have to set up your maps completely differently. I'm not even going to get there. Let me start trying to find. Jay, take a look for any questions. Let me
all right.
Take a moment to look for a model. The next thing we want to talk about is identifying, when you download a model, we want to be able to identify what types of shaders was it built for. Because if I take a if I go into the spec gloss, right, and I clear everything out and I load up a diffuse map that say here we go, stock media, textures, earth maps, right? Hey, I got an earth map. And if I grab this earth diffuse map 4K and I grab my earth normal map in 4K, and then I plop a, the specular map on it in 4K, and then put the glossiness map on, it doesn't look good.
I've seen better.
Right, but you see how no matter what I do to that, it doesn't look good. And as I start adjusting the glossiness and the roughness, it just makes it look like the entire continent is copper, And you know, it's just because and then it's turning green. These maps will not look good in spec glossiness because they're not maps that were correctly built for spec glossiness. My glossiness map, there's where I was screwing up earlier. My glossiness map should actually be maybe holding some color in it. Okay? Because the specular glossiness map, that's what I forgot to say. The specular glossiness map actually defines the color for the metallic areas. So I might go ahead and load the diffuse map in. If I take the diffuse map out, and I take the glossiness map out, and let me take everything back out except for the normal map. All right. And then I'll load in the, I'll do it that way. There's the specular map. But I mean, you can see here where even though I'm gray and I'm gray and I'm gray and I haven't even added a diffuse map, as I start adding specular and glossiness maps, I'm getting all the colors getting picked up by the shader, and it's just, you know, last time I don't want to mess with that. Whereas if I were to take this back to, you know, cook-torrence and strip everything out, you know, I can make this look really good in like, you know, 2 seconds flat, because I know that I'm going to do that, and I know I'm going to add in the specular map, and I'm going to add in the normal map, and you know, I can, oh, I want that's too bright, I want that to be 180 instead, right? And maybe I want you know, I want the roughness for the sun should be something like that,
right? And that almost
and I
looks
can carry that out.
It should be shining on the water and not on the continent there.
Yep, you're right. It should be. Do I have the? Yeah, let's go with that. That's a completely wrong thing. There we go.
There you go.
Interesting that the specular map itself had some color in it, isn't it? Anyway, let's go back to 3D.
So while you're hunting for a model that uses spec gloss,
yeah,
I'm just going to throw a couple of questions. Captain Slaymore asks, "What program did you use to create those maps?"
HitFilm.
he literally put them together right before we got on here.
As I for those of you who tuned in late, I kind of had an idea about how to approach this that literally hit me last night while I was sleeping, and I woke up and I started doing that. So all I did to create the maps is I mean, it just starts here with this base map, and this is just you know, there's a couple of planes, and I think there's the bottom plane is just black, the top one is gray, it's got a grid, it's got a little heat distortion on it to break it up, and then I just copied that over and used the diffuse. I used a couple of set mats on it to pull the colors out, and kind of my intention here was that I could take this diffuse map over and try and use that to create a proper diffuse map. Or like another thing I could do on this is I could add a whoops. Hey, I'm getting I don't need to do that. I'll just make another copy of my plane, and what effects are on here? Delete. And I'll add a fractal. And I'll add a.
So here's another question from Dafter Things. He wants to make his 3D objects look plastic, probably because he does brick films, right?
Phong Shader. It's the easiest one to work with, and Phong just happens to look plastic. It doesn't have the roughness maps or any of the other stuff. Phong is an early 1980s render engine, and it's the type of engine that's used when you think about things being, you know, oh my god, that looks so plasticky. So just use the Phong shader, and you don't even have to worry about most of this stuff. And I mean, you might want your maps and all that. I mean, sorry, your specular and
yeah, all of the other things that are in there, but they all come in the Phong shader, and HitFilm has updated the Phong shader, so
Yeah, it added the emission map so you can make things glow.
Yep, you can have lights and whatnot on them.
All right, I did go a little bit off there on the diffuse map, but what I was my initial hope was, and again I planned a 2-hour thing in a 1-hour session, is I just changed the diffuse map by putting this fractal noise on it, and you know the whole theory on that would have been that now I could come in and you know, go into the model and override the, did I set up override materials on my cook-torrence shader? I did not. Now I have. So that I'd be able to override the materials and go in and do a diffuse map and change the diffuse map to the diffuse composite, and now I've made a dirty sphere because I've got the fractal noise on it, right? Yay. And yeah, if I go in there, I can make it look a little bit more like a dirty object. And then if we were going to go into the specular gloss shading, then I would, you know, yeah, just add a time.
So any questions for Mike specifically about anything involving in the shaders, ask them now, because we're going to wrap it up here shortly, I think.
Ha ha ha! Found one right offhand, right off the bat. Awesome. There we go. At least that's one that's designed to work with. As Jay's fielding any questions, they've got to be.
Yeah, no, I'm looking through here. I'm waiting for anybody to ask a question. Feel free, ask away. While we're waiting, I will say there is an FX Home Forum thread that I added, models in HitFilm. Show off your models in that thread. Would love to see what you're doing there. You know, just to see. Oh, and I'll tell you what, while we're waiting, Mike, would it be all right if I showed your video?
Yeah, go for it.
Here it is. This is Mike's most recent video. It was sort of a challenge. You know, I said, hey, I'm doing this, you know, and he goes, oh, I can do that. And then he says, you know, and then I said, hey, I'm gonna have these things shoot, you know. He goes, oh, all right, I'll have him shoot. You know, I got these turns to move, you know. So he's like, you're killing me, man. So here is this was about 4 nights worth of work, I think, by Mike. And this is the video that he created. Here it is.
Yeah, it worked out okay.
Yeah, it worked out okay. How about tips for blending into a live action plate? This is from Solo Samurai Productions in Australia.
If you have the opportunity to shoot a 360-degree environment wrap of your location, do so. If you are, use your footage for reference, so find something that's kind of neutral colored, supposed to be neutral colored in your frame that's kind of whitish, like the inside of this bag is supposed to be white. And then I want to sample that as my highlight color, as my light color, because by sampling that color off something that's supposed to be bright, you know, whitish in your scene, then I'm matching the color of the light in the scene for my model. If I have something that's kind of gray or white in my scene, like a gray card, then this I also want to sample for the shadow color. I want to sample off this shadow side, and then my shadow color will match the plate of the scene, and then use your light wrap effect to blend into the darker areas. Usually I would use a 3-point setup. My and a 3-point setup. My key light is always my sunlight, so that's the one that I would sample off this color. My second color is I'm looking at some sort of color that's reflected from the environment, depending on what it's going to be. Say I was doing something flying overhead. My key light, my first light might be my sunlight. My second light might be something coming off the ground. So I might pick something, a color off the ground plate, and shine that up at a low opacity. So that's kind of the bounce light hitting the bottom of the plane off the ground. And then I'll use an ambient light at about maybe 5 to 10%, and I'll usually sample that from the sky near the horizon. And on my Triam23 YouTube channel, switch accounts, go to this one, go to my channel, bring that screen over here so people can see it. Here we go. VFX breakdown, Y-wing crash, foundry tracker test. If you look at that background, you'll see how it will show the lighting setup on those models, and you'll see that's exactly what I did, where I sampled a color off the rocks for the sunlight, and then I sampled a different color off the rocks for what's hitting the bottom of the Y-wing, and then how I took a little bit of color off the sky. And then the light wrap. And if you just look for this VFX breakdown, the Y-wing crash foundry tracker test, that's actually a pretty good example of a good 3-point lighting setup, and how the light wrap interacts, at least for a space scene or an aircraft scene.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Here's a question: if you were making a dragon, which shader would you use for the dragon scales?
First, I would try and look at the model itself and look at the maps that it comes with, and see if I can figure out what is more appropriate. And I'll give you a hint: if it's an FBX or an OBJ model, the chances are it was built using a shader model that isn't metallic glossiness or metallic roughness spec glossiness, whereas a GLTF model is always going to use one of those two. So it's going to depend on the model. I would not use Phong. Phong is too plastic. He doesn't offer me enough control. I would probably go ahead and use cook-torrence, because it's the one that I'm most comfortable in. I would probably play with the Fresnel values and try and the specular values, depending on the colors of my dragon. So if I've got like the dragon scales and I want them to be very, let's say I've got a green dragon, but I've got it to be very glossy. Believe it or not, I might actually set a specular highlight color of like a pink. And the theory on the specular highlight color being pink is that I'm kind of trying to cheat some subsurface scattering, like, if I had sun behind my ears, and, the thing where you see the sun behind my ears and it turns pink because I can see my blood vessels and my blood inside. So I might try a little bit of a pink specular highlight color, and maybe push the Fresnel a little bit more into a blue to try and give a bit of an iridescent sheen. But it would be, ultimately, it comes down to you're always going to have to experiment with the models. Jay and Greg and Frank are nodding. You can sometimes literally spend 2 or 3 hours just adjusting the material on a model for a scene and going back and forth, because that's where it's all going to happen.
Definitely.
Yeah. That's what I would do. Tips for blending into a live action play. Mike, can you tell others the location of the reflection map used in the 3D model importer?
I find that setting up my model, it can be replaced, helps tremendously. Yeah, so where's the reflection map in the model importer itself?
You mean the map that controls the intensity of reflections, Greg? I just want to make sure I understand the question.
I'm sure that's what he's talking about.
In cook-torrence. All right, let me go into my cook-torrence sphere. The location of the reflection map. Oh! You mean changing the little background, the default HDRI that the actual 3D model import is using? Can you change that? I know where those folders are. They're all buried somewhere, but I didn't know I could actually, get it to change the map that it's using in here.
It's currently in the dock scene. The lighting in the importer. Yes, you can.
Wow.
We're gonna have to have Greg come on talk.
Yeah, we'll have to have Greg come on. I didn't know you could do that, man. That's awesome. I know it's currently a dock scene. What's kind of funny here is, let me see if I can call up one more. Not you.
So while Mike is pulling that up, I am delighted.
I'm not trying to pull that up. I'm just noting that I did at one point a while ago go into where FX Home stores all of their environment maps, and I did rip them to a folder, but I didn't know I could actually get the importer to the importer dialog to change that. So I was just like, wow, look, they're all low resolution. But I did pull them to maybe use them at some point.
Nice. So I'm delighted to announce that next week we will have a special guest, and that will be Kirsty Tostefan, who is the marketing manager for FX Home, will be my special guest next week. Kirsty with FX Home will be talking about HitFilm and all of the products that they do, what they're thinking about doing, and where the company's going. She'll kind of give it a little bit of an overview, maybe on the history of the company, and it's going to be a fantastic conversation. So you don't want to miss next week for sure. It's going to be fun times. Solo Samurai has an idea. We should all collab on a short film. Same story, nothing long, something where we're all in. Not sure how you'd shoot that. Then everyone does their own edit effects and see different results. So you're talking about like we each do the same story and then we show them off, or like we each put a scene in that we then combine into one big short story? Yes. Are you still looking for the model or what?
No, I found it. I just I realized I called up two things that were spec gloss. Yeah, you don't have any kind of material like that. Okay, here, I'll use this one as an example. This is the materials folder for a T-Rex that I downloaded off of Sketchfab. And part of the trick, as I said a few minutes ago before we went off on the digression, just a bottom line spec gloss, don't mess with it yourself for now. Know that you can't take a material that was designed for a Phong, a cook-torrence, or a metallic roughness shader and slap it into spec glossiness. It won't work, because spec gloss is fundamentally different from the other three, and you need more time on that. Like I said, I could do an hour on spec gloss. But when I download a model, I might want to, start looking at and trying to figure out what was this built for. So if I just open up this particular random carriage, the diffuse map in a specular glossiness thing is also sometimes called an albedo. So I'm seeing here albedo or diffuse. I want to look at things like diffuse maps and albedo maps. And this albedo map has a lot of deep shading on it, but it doesn't have, the deep shading is like the paint and the texture on it. It's not really trying to do any kind of lighting material on it. And it's got an ambient occlusion map, right? So we talked about the ambient occlusion maps. I could have loaded this one up. But what we want to do is we want to start looking at, for roughness and specular maps, or metallic maps. And since this one has a metalness map, right, and it doesn't have, you know, and it has the albedo map, and it's got this thing that's a metal map and a color map. Oh, actually, this was designed to work with both. Somebody did this for both. So here we have an albedo map. This would work very well with cook-torrence because you see it's got all the shading on it and everything's light and dark and all that. And then if I come over here, hey, I got lucky. You see how that one's painted a lot flatter? Doesn't have all everything's much more crushed down. It didn't have all the lights and the darks that the other one had. So that's more painted correctly from metallic glossiness and specular. And what I can see from this is that this is a model that's made for a metallic roughness shader, and that's what I'm going to want to put on it when I load it in. This dinosaur, this one's been built for a specular glossiness shader, and the main thing that's giving that away is the specular map, right? I've got this specular level map, which looks more like a traditional specular map, black and white, controlling where the reflections are. But its specular map is color, so it's actually containing the color information for the skin, where it's reflecting specularly. And for Con, where you were talking about with your dragon, if my dragon model had something like a specular map that was showing me all these colors, then I know that this is built for the specular glossiness model. So really, so the bottom line, what we're talking about is being able to note that if I have these colored specular maps, then I know it's a specular glossiness model. If I've got a bunch of stuff that says metalness maps and, you know, metalness, barrel LP, metalness, then I know that that's a metallic glossy map or metallic roughness map, and anything else is going to be cook-torrence or Phong, and you just kind of need to know when to use those, because if you use the maps that are built for cook-torrence or Phong and the other two shaders, they won't work right. And this one has no maps because it's all in the material. Right.
All right, so Chris says we each put a scene into it, so we're like all in it. Then everyone goes out and does an edit / VFX, or maybe like a fake trailer. Could be easier to tie together since we're all in different countries. And Dafter Thing says, I have a story that would suit a live action, but I don't have the kit, contacts, or will. I'd be happy to donate it if people want something to work with. Well, I say we try it. What do you think? Let's do it. I'm in. I would love to do a collaborative effort across many countries and see if we can put together some sort of a fake trailer or even a short film. That'd be great. What do you guys think? Should we do that? Comments. Let me know if you're interested. Well, Mike,
3 different models of the Babylon 5 station.
Only 3.
Only 3. But again, they're all built. But they're all built for things that would use the cook-torrence or the yes. Keep using this app.
Yeah. So I think what we're getting at here is, you know, if you're downloading off of Sketchfab and you're using the download TF, then you know, then you're moving into the metallic roughness and maybe the spec glossy range. Otherwise, stick with cook-torrence as long as until you know for sure where you're at.
Well, I mean, another thing about it, and it was why I should have why I've been stupid about this, is if I load in this Babylon 5 station, you know, that's coming in, right, that's why I don't use that one, because it's got geometry errors. But you can see that the materials on that, it's just going to need a bunch of tweaking to work, because the you know, it doesn't look, you know, the specular maps haven't been loaded in. It's just bright and shiny, and it's got all of these different materials. So it would take me a couple of hours to set up, and then I go, look at these geometry errors. I need to go into Blender and fix that. Do not do that. Whereas if I go in and something that I've downloaded off of Sketchfab, and if I go into my characters, monsters, and creatures, and then I go into dinosaurs and dragons, and then I go into my T-Rex, and I just load in the scene file, you know, it comes in looking more or less correct because the GLTF has stored the shader things, right? And you know, we can see the highlights that are kind of glancing off of that. And if I just drop that in immediately, and go into my I'll go into my cook-torrence layer and turn that off. And if I just drop in the dinosaur and I rotate him, and then I go into his material and I make sure that he casts shadows. I'll turn on cast shadows on the light and go in and give it an environment map of, no, I want the environment map to be the environment map. And, you know, it's pretty much, I mean, of course, I kind of messed up the light on this earlier when I was kind of
messing
around. So 1000, right? But if I do 250 and then negative 405, it's going to more or less come in correctly. It looks like I might want to turn okay, this is set to diffuse and specular reflectivity of 100%, and I'm going to take that down to 50. And I'm going to, here you go. Use my search bar, make my life easier, right?
Yeah,
50,
boy, no kidding.
50, 50, 50. No, 60's fine. I mean, since it says 60, 60, 60, heck with it. You know.
Yeah.
But there we go. That's pretty much all I needed to do to that. All the specular and everything, you know, all the maps came in correctly. All of the textures came in. You know, you can see that the specular highlights are being picked up where they should be on the, you know, the map 500. And I just didn't have to spend, you know, 10 hours
dialing that in.
Yeah. And as I'm moving the light around, there I go, right? You see, as I'm moving the light around that, it's already looking good. I don't have to do anything to it.
Yeah.
So Sketchfab and GLTF models are, with HitFilm 16, a great time saver because, you know, I've already got it in my scene. If I just put a shadow catcher on there and then match the actual sun color, this would, right? And you see how as I just move that light around, how those highlights are picking up on that skin just, you know, beautifully. It's a beautifully textured model. It is. It doesn't have, you know, it doesn't have that much geometry on it. So it'll fall apart if I get too close to it. But I just don't have to mess with it. And any of the other two shader models, I talk too much.
You'd be taking a long time to get there. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. You'd be taking a long time to get there. So that's really the beauty of those newer shaders, is using those, you know, being able to just drop stuff in and it starts looking good right away. So,
Frank, did I get the point across, or did I just totally fall on my face for an hour and a half?
Yep. I just pulled that random. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, you just pulled that one at random. Rip my hair out with that one. I don't want to rip my hair out, Greg. It would take too long.
Yeah, your hair would. Mine would be easy. Not much left. All right, I'll tell you what I'm going to do, guys. I'll put a thread on the forum for Solo Samurai's idea of making a short film or a trailer or something collaboratively, and we'll see how many people we get involved, and we'll see if we can make that happen. I think that sounds like a fun time. Sounds like a really good idea. I would do it. I'm in.
Frank says hustler, so I guess I didn't fall completely on my face, but instead, I can't make that joke. No.
Oh, it's a family channel.
Yeah, it's a family channel. I'd like to thank that dark blob that I'm pointing at behind me. I'd like to thank my cat Loki, who's like, what? You have mentioned my name, so I will rise, but you are talking loudly and not paying attention to me, so I'm sitting here showing my displeasure by keeping my back to you. She's been patient, letting me use her room.
Yep, very nice of her. Well, we, like I said, next week I will have Kirsty from FX Home on, and it's going to be a great time, so definitely be here for that. Mike, any last words you'd like to impart?
Anti-disestablishmentarianism.
That's always a good one. Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious is my first pick.
Okay. Yeah. Let me. What I'll do as my last words is I'll just note that the HitFilm manual has been updated in the last month, and it has some information on the metallic roughness and the spec glossiness models. I only noticed that last night. The GLTF model format is developed by the Chronos organization, Khronos. And if you go to their page, if you search for, chronos.org/GLTF, then you can get more technical information, because, they'll give you the actual specifications and, what's actually being done on GitHub. This is some of the stuff that, this is stuff that I read and tried to break down into less than 15 minutes. There's a sample model repository, so you can go download the models that Chronos uses to test the shaders. Their new PBR launch presentation, the specification and the resources. So there's all kinds of stuff you can find on there. There's also very good that's what the clear coat's supposed to do. It's that additional glance on the card.
Yep.
And there are also some very good videos on YouTube. If you look up spec gloss versus see, I admit I use other people, metal rough versus spec gloss. Let's see if this CG cookie video right here, this one that comes up right on the top, Specular versus Metalness workflow for PBR shading in Blender. Take a look at that one, because that will, this base color diffuse, this metallic albedo versus diffuse that's popping up here. That's that thing that I didn't show, where you can even kind of see here where this base color map, this metallic albedo map on the left is a lot less detailed than the diffuse one on the right. And I think you can even see that just popping up there. So yeah, that CG cookie video, I really suggest watching that one, because this type of walkthrough wasn't necessarily the best thing to do for a live show. There's so much loading and swapping of maps, this kind of try and do some material overrides in real time was the closest thing I could do to being able to cover things and being able to show the differences. But definitely look up some of those other tutorials online. And I do recommend this one, because it's only about 5 minutes long, but it really gets the point across, and it really helped me put my notes together for today. So I think if you go watch that, that'll help a lot illuminate what I talked about here. Of course, here it was more about being specific to the HitFilm controls and what HitFilm calls it, so that you can go off and look at a tutorial that's geared towards Substance Painter or Blender or something else and have it make sense in HitFilm.
Makes sense.
And that's really what today was about.
Cool. Awesome.
So thanks for being here, guys.
And thank you for being here too, Mike. I really appreciate it. And that'll do it, I think. I appreciate everybody being here, and we'll look forward to seeing you guys.
They do not sponsor the channel, but maybe Mountain Dew should give Film Sensei some money.
They should throw a few bucks my way. That would be great.
Mountain Dew, the lifeblood of editors.
Yeah, that's what I've heard.
Cigarettes, but we're not gonna advertise cigarettes.
I don't smoke, and I don't drink Mountain Dew either.
Don't.
Sorry. Yep. Don't smoke, kids.
You're healthier than I am. Don't smoke, kids. Drink Mountain Dew in moderation, but certainly not every day. This is what I grab when I'm don't have enough time to make coffee before the. All right, I have one last thing to say. And I told Jay this beforehand, and it's just like, if I seem a little bit extra unfocused, it's because I'm using what used to be my parents' bedroom before they passed away. And that lovely cat in the background, I woke up this morning and she'd thrown up all over the computer table, these ear cups for my normal headphones. These are gone. These are being, yeah. So I hoped to have an hour to prep more of these maps for you, and you saw where I kind of had set up to do it, but instead it was like, she threw them on the computer! Thank God it was closed.
It's true. What can we say? That's what happened. Boy, I tell you.
Drink a lot of water with the MD.
Well,
Sorry.
we appreciate it, Mike, and we appreciate everybody being here, and we will look forward to seeing everybody next time.